Well, I think it's all very puzzling, to be frank. First of all, I find it difficult to understand the involvement of the Cabinet Secretary as opposed to the government's lawyers in dealing with the Guardian. That is unusual. Secondly, the whole incident involving Mr. Miranda requires penetrative analysis. I believe that the Independent Reviewer of Terrorism legislation, David Anderson QC, is actually doing that analysis as we speak. I hope that he will be able to make some public findings as to whether the Metropolitan Police, when they stopped Mr. Miranda, were using the appropriate powers.
And we also understand today that the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister instructed the Cabinet Secretary, Sir Jeremy Hayward, to urge the Guardian to destroy this classified material. Is it the Prime Minister's place to be influencing a newspaper in this way?
Well, I think it's the Prime Minister's place to ask for advice and for the problem to be solved. This is something that needs legal transparency. The way in which the newspapers and individuals are treated has to be within the rule of law. The Guardian is not above the law, of course, but nor is the law above the Guardian, save where it's proportional and provided by Parliament.
Do you think this has infringed on the freedom of press in any way? I mean, has the government been heavy-handed in its way of doing this and not, as you said, seeking legal advice?
I think that the argument about the freedom of the press is a distraction. I have real concerns about whether the Guardian should ever have considered publishing material obtained by Mr. Snowden, the publication of which could have a truly damaging effect on the national security of the United Kingdom and possibly of other countries too. If Mr. Miranda had in his possession material the disclosure of which might involve a breach, for example, of the Official Secrets Act, then it is possible that criminal offences were at least suspected, if not being committed. If that is the case, then the provisions that should be used for dealing with Mr. Miranda should be the appropriate criminal statutes, not Schedule 7 of the Terrorism Act.
Some people believe it was an abuse of the Terrorism Act of 2000, Section 7, as you described it, and that the government are being heavy-handed with their power. Was it an abuse?
Well, there are two questions. First of all, was it an abuse of Schedule 7 and Section 40 of the Act? It may have been, and the Independent Reviewer of Terrorism legislation will have to answer that question. It looks to me quite possible that there was an abuse or misuse of that part of the Act. Next question, was the government being heavy-handed? No, I don't think the government was being heavy-handed in principle, because it had every right to protect the national security of the nation. But the rule of law requires that we do it the right way. Once the government starts arbitrarily using the wrong means for enforcing its will to protect the national security of the nation, then we are in danger of undermining the rule of law. And this is not merely a pedantic lawyer's point. It's something that protects every citizen, and it's something that actually protects the reputation of the police and authorities. So we do need to know that transparently everything that occurred in this, from the Prime Minister's so-called instructions to what happened at Heathrow Airport, including whether and when legal advice was taken by the police.